everybody. Welcome to the Eat, Pray, Faith podcast with Dr. Tracey. That's me. And today we're going to be talking about peptides and the long game for men, basically looking at pain and recovery, overall brain health, and even cardiovascular with my great friend, Michael Antonelli, who is the CEO of Healthgevity, which is my top peptide company that I love in the nutraceutical space. Your formulas are so innovative, Michael, and I just love what you've done with the entire company and brand. So welcome and thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I know we've been talking about doing this for a long time and it's finally here. So
Yeah,
thank you for the invitation.
yeah, absolutely. Just for the audience, can you give us a little bit of background about you? I mean, I know you've been in this space for a long time, which means you started really young, of course.
I like to think that. Yeah, it's been almost 20 years in the practitioner nutraceutical world. And I started young and really, I think early on understood the potential of what this meant. And going back almost 20 years, you get this aha moment, but also frustrated and angry at the same time because there's part of you saying, why wasn't I around this my whole life? Why wasn't the doctors I've seen leading up to this path looking at more than a CBC and a CMP, basic blood work? But it also angered me about family members who I saw struggle and suffer through the first 21 years of my life that was never talked about lifestyle and movement and the power of eating better. And oh, by the way, supplementing right. So anyway, that we went to a whole tangent there, but it started 20 years ago. And I started with a company called Metagenics, and right from there became a sponge, learning from people like Dr. Jeffrey Bland, Dr. Mark Hyman, and incredible healthcare providers all over the East Coast who were doing some incredible work in their communities, and saw what this could do. And that's where I said, I need to learn, I need to network, and made a few career paths to learn different parts of the industry because ultimately I felt, and then during COVID, that this was going to happen. I was going to start my own company one day because you end up learning enough to start seeing the mission and vision change for some of these bigger companies. You're seeing and reading big pharma and hedge funds buying up all these natural brands. Then COVID hit. And like so many of us, did a lot of soul searching and praying about what do I want to do with my career, my life? What I want the legacy to be? And I felt like a lot of the practitioner brands stopped innovating at a time where they need to over innovate. And they spent more time not supporting practitioners in the local communities, but setting up Amazon Prime stores and going around. And I said, this is the time where Healthgevity was born, where I wanted to start the dialogue of healthy aging, health span optimization, and its correlation with chronic disease. And nobody was really talking about this at the time. And then during that, we saw this wave of peptides and the FDA regulating a lot of the compounding pharmacies. And it was a perfect storm. I said, okay, we're going to blend these unique bioactive nutraceuticals that many of our providers have comfort in and have trust and faith. We're going to bring in unique ingredients naturally occurring that are cutting edge and just breaking through globally. And we're going to add in peptides that could be done orally. And our team, which consists of frontline providers and researchers, we want to make sure we're translating the latest research and putting together formulations that are addressing multiple pathways within the body to tackle the targets that our providers are seeing every day in their practice. And by doing that, it allows that, let's just say, one ingredient in this blend isn't what was needed for you individually, but we have a built-in backup plan to make sure that when you and your provider are on a Healthgevity formula, it sets you up for success and to make sure you're achieving the goals that you're seeking to achieve. So that's the summary, but I'm happy to go into any of these conversations more deeper today during our time.
Well, I love that it's a peptide nutraceutical blend, most of your formulas. I mean, you do have isolate peptide formulas, but most of them are, you know, utilizing that backing foundational protocol of nutrition. Because even when I was listening to Dr. Kathleen O'Neill, who's one of your prime educators, and I would consider probably one of the top educators in the peptide world. I mean, she knows her stuff. Even she said, peptides shouldn't be out of the gate as a first therapy all the time. They should be secondary or even tertiary to a foundational lifestyle, a good supplement program. And so you kind of took that entire concept and put it together into your formulas, which is why I think they work so well and so fast. I get great results, and I have some top ones I love. Like I absolutely love your Resolve, which I know isn't, all peptide blend, but it does work for MCAS, and we can talk about all those things. But today, let's stick to finishing up our topic on men. We went through hormones, Michael. We went through ways to naturally raise testosterone, to balance hormones, to look at longevity. Where I think we're ending up today is what's the long game for men? And I get a ton of guys reaching out to me for peptides. First for injury and recovery. Like they want to know what they can do for their sore shoulder and their tennis elbow and all the things. And I just know that peptides work. And if they're already doing the foundational things, which a lot of them are trying to do, they're trying to get their branch chains in and their creatine and their magnesium and their multi, but it's that tweak. They need that tweak. And then I want to talk about some of the chronic issues that are more prominent in men. Neuro issues, right? Where we see the downfall of brain activity, and then also cardiovascular. So let's get into the pain and recovery aspect. And tell me what you're seeing with men and some of the formulas that you would suggest that they could use daily or even therapeutically to help them with that aspect.
It's a great topic to start with, especially after the last couple of recent episodes you hit on. It's bringing it full circle here. And I think, like myself, right, most men are living in this instant gratification world. They want the muscle, they want to feel better like yesterday. And it's not realistic, but how do we set our bodies up to thrive naturally? And that's the secret sauce. And obviously, if you're not eating right and moving right, everything we're going to talk about in this episode isn't going to be optimized, isn't going to be as impactful as it's intended to be. But what we are learning and seeing firsthand every single day is the power of peptides and the power when you stack in with things like branched chain amino acids and creatine. And it's really how do we put our muscle, our skeletal foundation in a position to recover as optimal as possible. Now, for those listening, that could be how do we get that extra rep or two in? How do we recover in between sets? And then how do we become less sore and rebound in between workouts or the off days? And there's some incredible weapons that we could be adding to your toolbox, especially if you're listening and you've hit this plateau or you were seeing some great gains and things have slowed down. Or maybe you're just new. Maybe this is the first episode you press play on, and we're here to help anyone listening. So I think it'd be a great place to start by highlighting one of the most popular peptides around, which you probably know what I'm going to say, is BPC 157. And that truly is a difference maker. It's why when you listen to a variety of podcasts, you're hearing about it. You go on things like Reddit, you're in the gym, you hear people talking about it because it really starts with the athletes, the bodybuilders, the weekend warriors. Those are usually the trendsetters that are willing to try things that, let's say, don't have that double-blind, placebo-controlled study, hasn't been peer reviewed. But when that group responds so favorably, and then taking it one step further, when you have a governing body like WADA mentioning a peptide by name, others say, well, this must be doing something. And it's a great peptide to start with because it's one you could plop in and it does so much in the body. So is that where you were thinking we
Yeah,
start?
let's start there, but let's just take one step back. I'm just going to clarify some stuff because you said about peer-reviewed studies. I think it's important for the listeners to know if they're new to peptides to understand that they're not drugs. They're not really classified as anything, which is where the gray area sits, right? They're not supplements, but they're not medications. So it's one of those things where nobody really knows where they sit. And so for governing bodies to get a hold of them and try to regulate them, they have to be classified as something that they can regulate. And under the FDA and things like that, they don't fall in any categories. So, what we talk about here today, the reason that you can have access to these is because they are still available, which is good, which is what we want. And we want to protect that right because I don't know, Michael. I haven't had any side effects from people except good health taking BPC. I have termed BPC the multivitamin of peptides because you can just take it all the time. It's naturally made in your body. So I just want people to have some clarity there. Maybe you can expand on that in the way that you want to, but then yeah, let's get into the how does BPC work in the body? Who's it good for? What's the therapeutic dose they should take? Like all the things.
Absolutely. And bringing back up Dr. Kathleen O'Neill Smith, she refers to BPC 157 as that Swiss Army knife of peptides. But taking that step back on foundational peptide 101, right? And peptides are amino acids, strings of amino acids, 2 to 40 amino acids. There's also bioregulators that fall under that, 2 or 3 amino acids. And then you have larger strings of amino acids, which are proteins. Now, if you're listening, you might have heard of some prescription peptides. And also, this can drill deeper into delivery system. So you may be personally or know a friend or a family member on a GLP-1. You may have a family member on insulin, right? These are all peptides. And you may have some family members that are on or friends on collagen peptides, right? There's all these different categories. But the peptides that we like to talk about, and I group these into a few different areas, right? There's peptides that I feel could fall under the therapeutic effects like the foundational healing, another phase I call enhanced health, and then 3, optimized performance. And I think that's where this episode's going to fall under is how do we optimize performance? And the oral peptides is what we're considering nutritional supplements, right? Things that can be done in a very precise delivery mechanism. And so anything we talk about today, Healthgevity related, is oral peptides. And then that layers into BPC 157, which, if you're doing some Googling or asking around, yes, you can inject it. It could be a cream, it could be a nasal spray, and it could be done orally. And so, yeah, that kind of tees us up
Yeah.
to go into the weeds here.
So tell me, what is BPC? How does it made in the body naturally? Why do people need to replace it? And what can you expect from taking it? What is the biochemical pathway that it works in to help with recovery?
So BPC 157 is a string of 15 amino acids discovered in 1993, and it is naturally occurring in our gastric juice, which is really, really unique. Now, also to disclaim, our BPC is not actual gastric juice, right? These are mimetics of the similar sequence occurred in the gastric juice. But what's really unique with this peptide is its ability to work systemically. So, a couple of big mechanisms, right? Immune modulating stands out, supports inflammation, modulates nitric oxide, cytoprotective. But when you look at some of the data on PubMed, there's almost 200 studies, mostly animal models. But you start seeing some remarkable wide-ranging things from musculoskeletal issues, actual Achilles rupture, ulcers, and then even the gut-brain axis, getting back to its Swiss Army knife of peptides. But I like to say this is the peptide that, if we were to create an analogy, is like the Roomba vacuum. That robotic vacuum that's moving around the floor, searching for things to pick up. And if there's nothing in that area to pick up, it continues to move. That's what this peptide's doing in the body. It's searching for things to assist the repair process, the regeneration process, the repair mechanisms for a natural response. So there are some people that say this works quickly. There's some people that say they don't need this long term. They kind of pulse it in and out. And then there's another group that says, I love how I feel when I'm on this. I'm less achy. I'm repairing better. And again, getting back to what we said earlier, it's why WADA brought this up because they saw it was giving athletes an added advantage, right? Staying healthier longer, being better in your prime on the field longer. Those aches and pains, right? The nicks that you get just from being active felt like the body was recovering at a greater way. And that's what's so beautiful about this peptide, because you could drop it in to so much. And you'll see, especially the oral, its ability to help support the gut's role in all these connections. And then there's ways to improve absorption, and there's other stacks that you can layer in with BPC. But it's definitely one for the topic today when we think about its role with somebody active, right? Athletes, active individuals. So if we're breaking down, I like always say, some of the bullet points as summaries. Accelerating recovery, right? You're going to see this as a peptide that stands out. Supporting the body's response to natural inflammation and enhancing joint mobility and recovery. Again, big areas. Then you'll have these people that will say, this peptide made a huge difference before I had surgery coming up, or that bone fracture, or the patient that or listener that gets sick a lot, right? Autoimmune conditions. We have the Lyme community. And then you have the biohacking community. These are all gravitating towards this peptide. And it's a big one. It's a great one to start with, too. If you're new to peptides and you're already doing some of the things that your other episodes hit on, try this one out. Let us know.
Right. Because it's time, right? I mean, BPC is probably the foundational peptide that if anybody comes to me with an injury or even gastric things, and you said it, we make this peptide in our gastric juices, but how many people, top four medications in the United States that are recommended are GI repressant medications, PPIs, any type of acid reducer. So if you're on those meds, you're already low on this body protection compound peptide, which is known as the Wolverine peptide. If everyone thinks of X-Men and Wolverine, I mean, I know that's my generation, I guess, but he could recover. That is the entire concept behind it. So hands down, BPC, easiest to start with, multiple pathways of enhancement, multiple pathways of support. If you have to pick one, pick BPC. I like to start out with about 1,000 micrograms a day for about the first 30 days, and then I see where that client is and recommend adjustments. Is that a protocol that you've seen your other practitioners put in, or what are you seeing in the industry with that?
Yeah, I think you're right on. So what you're going to want to find is a capsule containing 500 micrograms each. If it's an oral form, you're going to want the arginate. And if you are finding an injection, acetate is the form of BPC that's best for that. So we're sticking with what we know. Arginate salt, BPC,
Mhm.
500 microgram capsules. It's best fasted an hour away from food. And you hit it on. We see this respond most favorably doing one capsule twice a day for the first month and then reassess.
Good. Awesome. And you guys use a special biochemical, I don't want to say, I'm not sure what the correct term is, but the snack. Could you just go into that? Because I see that on your labels. Because people always say, like, why do you have to inject a peptide? Or when can you take it orally? And I always explain to them that peptides are, no different than a steak to your body. It's going to try to break it down. But there is some science that you have come up with that actually gets it through to where it needs to be. Can you just touch on that briefly?
Yeah, thanks for bringing it up because I think that's a big knock. People think it has to be injected or you're wasting your money. That's been largely debunked, especially with the amount of bottles we've placed in medical offices all over the US over the last 3 years. But you're right. Part of the secret sauce is the identification and utilization of something called saccharosate sodium. The acronym is SNAC. It is GRAS approved or generally regarded as safe, so it can be used in nutraceuticals, although it is very expensive. So most people that are doing BPC or other peptides opt not to use it. With us, especially at the level we're using, it's creating a protective barrier around the peptide. Because as we think about how much gut dysfunction is prevalent with us personally or in society, the notion is peptides are getting destroyed before they reach where they're needed. Hydrochloric acid, pH changes. So by creating this protective shield and guard, we are chaperoning the peptide to where the body needs it. And so our secret sauce is about 3 milligrams of saccharosate sodium per serving. And we have noticed because we've had providers that were using others switch to ours and feel like not only is this working more efficiently, quicker, it lasts longer, and patients or people using it are reaching their goals more efficiently. So there's definitely something there on the secret sauce that we are utilizing here at Healthgevity.
Absolutely. So it really matters when you're looking at these peptide companies out there, and there was a million that kind of popped up. You know, Cutting corners is very typical in the nutraceutical industry to save a buck. And I get it because, the number one conversion factor for somebody buying a supplement used to be price, used to be. But because people have become so educated and understand quality now, the number one conversion factor is convenience. You make it easy for them to get something that's high quality, they will do it. So I'm going to make it easy for you guys. In the show notes, y'all, is the link to all these peptides on my website. Please go check them out because it's not an overwhelming amount that you've created. It's a very specific, therapeutic, and targeted peptide product line that you've come out with. You didn't create everything. You created what was needed in the industry and you did it better. So love that about it. What would you use in conjunction with BPC, Michael, if we're talking about injury recovery for men for the long game? Like, is there something you would stack for a period of time or something you would say, like, these two always go together and it's great? I know you have some formulas like that too.
We do, yeah. Well, and there's a couple options of BPC 157. So I think when we're talking about this as a target, recovery, healing, pain, the BPC with PEA is going to be the one I suggest. PEA is a lipid resolving mediator, over 600 publications on it. We produce it in response to elevations of pain and inflammation, and it's also used as a functional filler within the BPC capsule. So let's just assume that's the first piece of the puzzle here. The second formula is going to be Resolve. And again, the pro-resolving mediators, the specialized pro-resolving mediators, PRMs, SPMs, what we know is that as we age, as we have stress, as we have disease, we have this low-grade unresolved inflammation present that is fueling the fire. And so this is an area that has been very near and dear to me. I was actually part of the first group in North America that commercialized SPMs over a decade ago, not to show my age, and was blessed enough to be at Dr. Charlie Serhan's lab at Harvard, who's discovered SPMs. And we wanted to create a formula that was this wide net complement to BPC, but not a peptide. And so there's a lot of usual suspects that you're going to see continually come up in the literature. Curcumin's one of them, right? And what's the big knock? Not well absorbed. And I'm sure every guest you have that is aligned with some sort of curcumin comes on, they're like, oh, we have the best. And listen, there's a lot of great forms out there. And for us, it's just a piece. It's not the only answer. So we have Theracumin Super, which to me is one of the strongest, most utilized research-backed forms, but we stack that with tetrahydrocurcumin. So with those two stacked together, are impacting and influencing and modulating every major pathway associated with unresolved inflammation. Then from there, perilla which I feel is just so underappreciated and utilized. Perilla is so meaningful for Th1, Th2 balancing, mast cell, allergies, and in this case, right, unresolved inflammation. So that's going to be the second ingredient in there. Then we look at more usual suspects, but in highly absorbed forms, boswellia and quercetin in the phytosome format, astragalus and ginsenoside RG1 for absorption enhancement and supporting the guts role in all of this. And the last piece of Resolve that I loved when I read about it and researched it is a flower called Acmella. So we're going back to the blue zones here, island of Sardinia, and in folk medicine, this is a flower that doctors were giving to patients to chew on to numb the mouth. It's called the toothache plant. And when I was rounding out this formula with our researchers, we felt that this made such sense to add in to help the body on a cellular level, on a musculoskeletal level, stay strong and vibrant. So Resolve stacked with BPC or any of the BPCs, but specifically BPC plus PEA is going to be your 1-2 punch in terms of high ceiling, high reward, and minimal capsules. So for those listening and you're like, listen, I'm not here to pop pills all day. We're really identifying ingredients that are providing a lot of punch, but don't require a lot of space or a lot of capsules to deliver the research dose.
Well, I don't know. I mean, in my clinic, people walk in with like bags of supplements. I don't think they're really worried about how many pills they're popping, although they're wasting a lot of money, is what I tell people. Like, the most important supplement you need is the one you need. Just like
Exactly.
Don't take them all. You don't need them all. So that's why sometimes it helps just tailoring that protocol. So that's awesome. So BPC 157 plus PEA, that is a formula, comprehensive formula that is under the Healthgevity brand. You can find that in the show notes. Plus the Resolve, which I said in the beginning is like one of my favorite. It fits everywhere. It really does. It's a very unique formula to get the inflammation under control. And you had said SPMs a few times, just for the listeners, those are called specialized pro-resolving mediators. And those are derived from the good fats that you take in. The issue is we're not always producing these little converting factors called hydroxylated mediators. So that's really what's in these SPMs that helps us convert the good fats that we ingest into pathways of specialized inflammation resolution. And there's all different pathways like maricins and all that. So it just depends on what you need and your body figures it out. So SPMs, I think a couple years back, it was like 4 years back, maybe even five when the pandemic hit, that they came out and I was like, this is a game changer in our industry. And I love SPMs. I use them in a lot of my protocols. So I was really excited to see the pro-resolving mediators that were put within your formulas. So really appreciate that. All right, let's move on to brain and neurodegenerative disease because I think let's just go down the cholesterol path real quick. We talked about cholesterol in the beginning. I had Dr. Richard Silva on. He's a functional medicine practitioner, DO in Florida. And he started out in the cardiometabolic space really heavily. And what he saw was the way that we were testing cholesterol, and he talks about it all through the podcast, brilliant podcast as the last episode. But, he really measures the particles that matter, like ApoB, ApoA, and LP little a, which is the number of particle sizes and the oxidized LDL, etc. He's like, that's your cardiovascular risk. He's like, everything else, maybe triglycerides and low HDL and that combination. He said, but really, cholesterol can be influenced by food within 4 hours. So you want to make sure you're fasting, etc. Point to that saying is he really believes statins have a huge impact on brain and depleting the brain over long periods of time because we know that cholesterol is the majority of the brain, the majority of the myelin sheath between neurotransmitters. I know you have some incredible formulas, and I want to hear about these for men that may be experiencing, because one of Dr. Silva's top three things that he talked about that all men should look at. He said, number one, mobility and walking. If you're losing your mobility and ability to walk, he's like, you're already declining. The second thing was mind. He's like, forgetfulness, not remembering where you put your keys. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the impact of brain, men, longevity, and peptides. Go.
Huge. Yeah, big area. And one of the areas I also like to say we should be starting with, because if you don't have the brain energy, if you don't have the ability to focus and lock in, everything we're going to talk about isn't going to be as impactful. So, a couple of things that we're going to hit on is those big concepts. And if you're not waking up feeling refreshed, you're crashing in the afternoon, you're not going to be willing to leave the couch. So, what are some things we can bring to you that are designed to work fast, lift the fog, and then propel you forward? And we could start with, I think, some bigger bucket themes. So, brain energy. We're going to talk about acute and chronic focus, reduction in brain fog, motivation, but then within that, enhancing synaptic plasticity and memory function, the role of the mitochondrial and neuronal energy. These are all big buckets. How do we protect the mind, protect what we have? And then memory recall, the ability to, even short term, like, oh, where is my keys? What was that person's name? These are major areas that we can protect and prevent.
I need all of
And
this. Let's go.
check, right?
He's always like, why can't you ever remember where you put your coffee cup? I'm like, I don't know. Like, I just.
Yeah, I'm with you. And what are many people turning to right now? Caffeine, right? Coffee, energy drinks. And the data that's coming out is pretty eye-opening. About 60% of us are either slow or fast metabolizers. So we're turning to caffeine, and some of us are such fast metabolizers, we get none of the benefit And those listening, right, if you're drinking coffee all day and it's just therapeutic, that's you. And then if you're like my wife, for example, who drinks caffeine past 10 a.m. because you know you're going to be up all night, that you're a slow metabolizer. That's 60%. And then we haven't even talked about the amount of people who have this genetic issue with caffeine, but yet it's what we all turn to. So a couple of the researchers on our team found through their discovery network different metabolites that caffeine convert into in the body. And what they saw was that 80% of caffeine is converting into something called paraxanthine. And then in a lab setting, they said, well, if we could just cleave off, isolate paraxanthine, and deliver that, what happens? The big takeaways on a one dose administration is that you override it if you're a slower, fast metabolizer, and you bundled all the benefit without all the downsides that sometimes caffeine can bring, the jitters, the crash, or the buildup intolerance. So paraxanthine in its pure form is an incredible therapeutic agent. But then we look at other things that help the brain rewire for success, the serotonin, the dopamine, and we look at things like alpha GPC, right, for the choline doning, things like N-acetyl-L-tyrosine, even L-theanine in a low dose can help balance the brain waves. And these are all things we put into something called Brain Boost. Works within 20 minutes or less, but it's there. You can use it day to day, but that really helps elevate the mind to give you the edge without feeling wired or that you're on something. But to me, it kind of just sets the tone for bigger and better things to happen. You could do it pre-workout. You could even do it when you're hungover, right? It's anytime your brain needs that boost, it's a formula you can turn to. But then when we get into the weeds of the memory recall, right? Then we start thinking about, well, what are these stacks? So you got the brain boost for when you need the boost, but then we have something called neurogevity. And neurogevity is really there to help with the signaling. We have organic lion's mane, which is in both of these formulas, but then uridine, and you got ergothioneine, which this whole mitochondrial connection is incredible, but ergothioneine, and you're going to hear about a newcomer because what we found out recently, and rhodiola is in a lot of vitamins right now. Rhodiola just was added to the endangered species list. So through some of our companies that do a lot of the research and ingredient creation, through natural fermentation, they were able to isolate something called salithroside, which is occurring it's a 1% occurrence in rhodiola, but it's really there to do the heavy lifting of the neurological and stress and fatigue adaptogenic ability of rhodiola. And they were able to megadose from a 1% occurrence to be 99% pure salithroside. So that's also a neurogevity. Really, really unique because when you start getting into these higher levels of these bioactives, that's where you're getting this response, this feel. And with the brain, that's what you want, right? And especially the whole salithroside ergothioneine stacking, and then even there's a peptide dihexa in there, really there to help rewire the brain and even acutely, or the more you take it, the better it is on both of these formulas. But really powerful combinations for an area that we all need sometimes a little help with.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, what I tell people is your habits today set you up for your future. They're not for tomorrow, they're for 10 years. I tell my kids that I'm like, the stuff that you do today, how you fuel your body, it's for a decade from now. So, you're not fueling for just right now. And so this is really something that men need to think about, especially people that are taking a statin. We know the neurological impact of those things. People that work around chemicals, people that have had head injuries. I mean, all of this. Athletes, how many athletes do you know, Michael, that have had a concussion or several?
Yeah.
We take that part and they're like, oh yeah, they're out 6 weeks on a recovery protocol. What are they doing? Nothing. They're doing nothing. And so it's really important that we start talking about this in the industry, that post-concussion syndrome is a real thing. We need to address the injury, just like a broken leg. You can get a broken brain. And with athletes, especially if you've had a head injury, you need to do things that are going to build the brain. The brain loves water, fat, and food. It needs neuroplasticity, communication between the neurotransmitters, and that's what these formulas do. And then yes, there's general enhancement as our brain ages and we lose that neuroplasticity naturally. It doesn't have to be as catastrophic as we're seeing. Add on a bunch of medications that deplete the body of nutrition and interfere with the myelin sheath regeneration of cholesterol. It's a perfect storm. So we really need to be paying attention. It's not sexy, right? Brain health. Everyone's like, oh, we'll just skip right over that. But for men, this is a huge chronic disease risk for,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Well, and especially the connection with sleeping, right? I think if all of us just really honestly had a conversation with ourselves, how many people feel like they're sleeping adequately? Like that's where we're repairing and regenerating at the greatest point.
Mhm.
And sleep, I think, is starting to become more and more of the conversation with its correlation with longevity.
Well, talk about serenity a little bit because that's one of your formulas.
Yeah, yeah. So Serenity and then even the Serenity PM, which we're now calling Sleepgevity, is there to, so you got Serenity is your 24/7 support. Things that are fast acting, working 20 minutes or less to allow you to have that natural chill pill, right? We are all faced with different levels of stress every day. Some are we have control over, some we don't. So it is nice to have something naturally that we can utilize, things that have dihydrohinochiol that are fast acting to help modulate GABA. Saffron, which is not only great for GABA and hitting on things like anxiety support, even depression support, but that's going to play a role. There's even holy basil in there that's going to help modulate some of those neurotransmitters. L-theanine, another great adaptogenic, cortisol levels. But we're even seeing this whole gut brain communication network, and there's precision probiotics being discovered. In this case, the Alplantirum 815 that's helping the body support healthy production of GABA throughout the day rather than this supplemental spike and crash. So that's your foundation that we call Serenity. And then the Sleepgevity version taps into a brand new peptide that is going to enhance not only the body's ability to get a sleep, but lengthening every phase of sleep while improving sleep score on dose one. It's
Mm.
melatonin free for those that are listening that don't do well with melatonin, but we're tapping into L-tryptophan as a way to help the body's ability to quiet the mind, or if you're who I call stressed, wired, and tired, where you're laying in bed, your mind's racing, everything you did or didn't do throughout the day that just passed, but what you have on tap tomorrow. So quieting the mind, allowing the body to get to sleep, but then enhancing the deep sleep, and then waking up feeling refreshed and not groggy, which is another area of importance for many. But really setting ourselves up for a great day ahead, right? That's the importance of sleep. That's where our body is going to repair, regenerate, and get ready for whatever's laying ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that it's melatonin free because some people don't do well with melatonin as a sleep aid. I normally think it's because their other hormones are imbalanced, but I know that I use it in high doses for people that have inflammation during the day. So it's not, we have to stop compartmentalizing, I think, in our brains that something that says serenity is for sleep. It's for circadian rhythm reset, for the body's natural rhythm to find itself. And that's going to impact your heart, your blood pressure, your digestion, your hormones, your neurotransmitter response. Like it's really important that we don't take the allopathic model of compartmentalizing health and look at whole body. So I love the serenity. So I'm hearing that for the day as a natural kind of like reset your response, right? And then during the night, if you do need something to help fall asleep, stay asleep, and expand those healing ranges that we have within our sleep patterns that we know of, this can support those things. So love that. Last thing, we're going to talk about cardiovascular health, heart health, vascular. I think this kind of plays into everything, but I chose these things. Then I have two questions about just giving some guys some gym tips because I like your prime strength. So I do want to talk about that a little bit. But let's talk about cardiovascular health and risk and what you have come up with over there at Healthgevity.
Yeah, this is an area. even coming out of COVID and seeing all the chronic disease all over the US and all over the world, heart disease still comes up as a leading cause of death. So when we analyze emerging literature and identified, okay, if we're going to make the most robust three capsule formula, what are some of those must-haves, right? We start thinking about, we talk to our doctors, right, that are doing advanced blood chemistry. We know that elevated lipids and hypertension right up there. But especially coming out of COVID, another big word that was coming up was the endothelial glycocalyx. And the glycocalyx that could be so easily destroyed or damaged can be just as easily rebuilt, right? This security card of all our vessels and microvascular system. Then we look at circulation. We look at things like nitric oxide. These are all big buckets. And another big thing as a longevity company is we're believed to be as young as our vessels. So how do we really hit on all the above in one formula? And so we looked at what a lot of our providers were using for this group, right? You're going to hear about things like bergamot come up, CoQ10 come up. So those both are in there. But there was another emerging area with we saw as vascular aging connected with NAD decline. And a really unique ingredient that we were one of the first to utilize, and the researcher and discoverer of the ingredient, Dr. Hector Lopez, helped put this formula together, is called NAD3. And that's really on a cellular level playing offense and defense, helping identify the root cause of NAD depletion while putting the body in the cellular level in a position to create more NAD. We stack the NAD3 with niacinamide as the next component to this formula. Then we looked at, well, CoQ10 is great. Many people are already on it, but there's absorption concerns. So out of Europe, there was a unique ingredient that's binding CoQ10 with collagen peptides. And what really won me over was they took this powder, put it in a cup of water, and put their hands up. We didn't touch the cup. Within seconds, it took over, dispensed throughout the entire glass of water. This peptide matrix with bound to the CoQ10 to facilitate absorption into the bloodstream was so critical. And at 300 milligrams, that was a really important dose for our doctors to be at. Then from there, we look at nitric oxide. And a lot of our providers are doing the nitric oxide test strips, seeing what you could do. And there was a botanical combination of moringa, black ginger, and pomegranate that had multiple human studies for acute and long-term nitric oxide production. And so we layered that in there. Seaweed utilization as fucoidin for the glycocalyx. Now we start getting into the real undertones of the capillary microvascular network, which so many people forget about because they're on so many things, they're reading about it, hearing about so many other things. But this is where we start really hitting on circulation and all things that come with it. So the fucoidin there to support and repair and regenerate the glycocalyx is in there. ACE inhibiting peptides, right? You said earlier, we stack these bioactives with peptides to create these unique blends. Pepti pump for blood flow throughout the body is in there. And then last but not least, nanokinase for fibrinogen, for spike protein. This is really a formula that's hitting on all the angles for root cause support. And again, a big one. So whether you're, prevention or you're already there and you're looking to get out of the hole, or even our athletes that's looking at blood flow and oxygen to the lungs, right? This is hitting on a lot of those big buckets that many of us have as goals, short and long term.
Right. And even blood flow for recovery.
Yes.
So it's one of the things I tell people, like, your cardio NAD is really about vascular health and blood flow to the right areas at the right times. That's what keeps us alive. So if you have an injury and it's in chronic inflammation, you're using the BPC with PEA and you're using the Resolve and you're getting that down. The next stack would be cardio NAD. Let's get some blood flow to the area. So I think I love how all of your formulas just come together as this synergistic protocol. If guys would just come into this podcast, listen, and start to build these stacks for their health and put away the 40 supplements that they're taking. Besides a good multivitamin and maybe some extra magnesium and some zinc here and there, probiotic to time, you can really benefit from the synergistic blends that you've put together because it does encompass all the nutraceuticals for what they're targeting. And these can be done therapeutically. Like they should be building their apothecary, like people call me and say, well, I need to do that. I'm like, what do you have? And they're like, well, nothing. I'm like, well, that doesn't help me. Like you got to have things on hand, So build this apothecary. It doesn't mean you have to take BPC every day, but I always have, um, I build a peptide stack with my Vitaboom box with your BPC, the longevity, which I love. You should talk a little bit about longevity too. But all of these things are so important. So to finish up, let's give men just what they're probably listening for. Like, what are some things that could enhance some muscle growth? Talk to me about your kind of muscle enhancement performance peptide blends.
Yeah. It's going to start with an incredible peptide, nature-derived Pepti Strong. We were the first to bring this into the US in the practitioner side 3 years ago. And what we saw, even there's no human studies published yet, we had some preclinical, but now what we're seeing is that this is a peptide at 2.4 grams that's going to enhance muscle protein synthesis, outperforming the gold standard, which was milk-based peptides. It's going to support fast and slow twitch muscle fiber. It's going to support healthier release of inflammation post-exercise. But now we're seeing strength, performance, and even bone density, all from this peptide. And that's what's in a capsule version that we call longevity, and it's in a powder that we call prime strength. But it's a great peptide, regardless of where you are in age, male or female, uh, active or not active, right? We even saw this being studied with hospitalized bedridden patients that can't move and maintaining the muscle they have there. But muscle is the predictor of aging, or one of the main predictors. So whether it's age-related muscle loss or immune-related muscle issues or prescription-related issues, or you're an athlete or a weekend warrior, this is for you.
Yeah. And honestly, strength as well. Another of the pillars that Dr. Silva talked about. He said, if you're a man and you're losing strength, it's a sign that there's something going on. I thought that was really interesting. And actually, I looked up some studies after the podcast. It's one of the top indicators for basically overall cellular aging and the risk of neurodegenerative disease is loss of strength, even more so than loss of muscle mass. Isn't that interesting? Because you can lose some muscle mass and still retain your strength. You can still be strong at whatever mass you're at. What is the difference between the prime strength and the longevity? Is it just the delivery system, or is there more to the prime strength? And then it looks like you have two formulas. One's a new one, a 2.0. So what's coming up here?
Yeah, so not knowing when this is going to air, most likely the 2.0 will be the one out. And so Prime Strength is a dual peptide powder, unflavored, unsweetened. It's literally raw materials blended together, designed to enhance any other beverage carrying the flavor. So that could be your protein shake, your smoothie, your fruit and veggies, your coffee. But this is powerful. 5 grams of creatine. There's just more and more data coming out on the role of creatine in a variety of different health areas, especially longevity. So we couldn't ignore that. Creatine's in here, the 2.4 grams of Pepti Strong, taurine, glutamine, and then in the 2.0, we're featuring dileucine, which is the dipeptide form of leucine. Really, really, on a global level, impressive studies. This is the first time you're hearing about dileucine. It's increasing muscle protein synthesis greater than leucine, which is hard to do, increasing strength, both leg press and bench press compared to placebo. Dileucine will aid in gains in upper and lower strength. It's going to support muscle endurance compared to leucine head to head. And dileucine gets absorbed faster and lasts longer than leucine, which is the gold standard, right? So that powder is going to be stacked. 2 grams of dileucine with the 2.4 grams of Pepti Strong. So you're getting two different peptides in that base. And then on the capsule side, you have the Pepti Strong and Pepti Pump, again, dual peptides with ginsenoside RG1, which is synactive at 100 milligrams. That's going to hit on the senescent cell burden within the muscle that can inhibit gains. So those are cells that don't apoptose. They have no function. They drive inflammation. So 100 milligrams hefty dose for stamina, repair, endurance, and recovery. And the astragalus ginsenoside RB1, which is estrogen for the gut muscle connection. And that's what's going to be on the capsule side. So some are utilizing both. On days they want capsules, they'll do that. On days they have pill fatigue, they got the powder.
Very cool. Very cool. I love it. So many things, even new delivery systems. Amazing. So guys, all of the links that he's talking about with the products are in the show notes. Feel free to go look around. I've made a special coupon for people that want to purchase these. If they want to start them, if you need any help, please reach out. And Michael, do you want to leave us with any parting words or anything that you feel that this audience, men in general, who are looking for effective change in their health, what parting words do you want to leave them with?
Age is just a number. Genetics is only a piece of the story. And we are in control no matter how late we start from making healthier choices. If you even just start today to move a little bit more, read a little bit more, pray a little bit more, your body is capable of so much incredible areas that are going to change your life for the better. So you could be this advanced supplement user and listener of your show, and you're going to learn things today that are going to enhance your outcomes. But if you're just starting, trust us, you will lead a better life by making these changes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you again. Thanks for everything you're doing in the industry. As I said, I just think your formulas are so innovative. You're always thinking, you always see what's coming. So I really appreciate all your hard work and everything that you've brought to the forefront. So thank you very much.
Well, I thank you. And thanks for having me and your commitment to education and supporting so many people in need. It's really an honor to be on this episode. So thank you.
You're sweet. I paid you to say that. No, I'm just kidding. So guys, thanks for tuning in today. If you feel that you would benefit from any of the formulas here, absolutely go check them out. If you feel this podcast would benefit someone you know or love, please share it. Also subscribe and make sure you check us out on all our social media channels. And Michael, thanks again. We'll definitely have you back for more topics. God bless.
Thank you. Have a great day. Be well, everyone.